The cases that mean the most to me, you're one of the people. And so I have to say before I even start today, I'm so mad you all back up in here. Prove to Mr. Wallace that he is the father of your 9-month-old son, Ronell.
I don't want my kids to grow up not having no father in their life.
She is a whore.
Mr. Wallace.
Show me how to treat a woman or to be a man or...
But you still going back and forth between the two women because she's pregnant now and the baby could potentially be yours?
Yes.
You said you had your kids and you all were having a great day. And I have been talking about you nonstop since then.
I had enrolled in school, but I never did go because I had got pregnant once again. And she got pregnant with her baby, with her son.
But it's not funny. I keep seeing a smirk on your face. You know
it's sad. Because it's sad that I'm back here again.
There are moments in life when a single test does not just reveal DNA, but exposes the hidden truth about trust, loyalty, identity, and the quiet scars that families carry. Sometimes, people take a DNA test thinking it will bring clarity, but instead, they discover that people regret taking such tests when the truth begins to unravel everything they believed. In this courtroom, led by Judge Lauren Lake, truth changes everything. Relationships are questioned, loyalty collapses, and the meaning of family is forced into the open. This is not just about biology, it is about the relationship between law and justice, the emotional landscape of real human lives, and the consequences of choices made in silence. The courtroom is filled with an atmosphere that mixes tension, exhaustion, and the quiet hope that truth might bring healing. Judge Lauren Lake sits at the bench, calm but firm, prepared to guide everyone through the emotional and legal complexities that unfold during paternity hearings. The room is not dramatic in appearance, but the emotional energy makes it feel intense, almost heavy, as if every word spoken could restructure someone's life. In attendance are the mother of the child, the man who is uncertain about being the father, and sometimes another woman or extended family member who has also been impacted by the ongoing relationship dynamics. The situation reflects not only personal conflict, but also the broader struggle many families face when love, betrayal, trust, and responsibility intersect. The mother often arrives holding both frustration and fear, concerned about her dignity, her child's future, and the stability of her household. The alleged father frequently appears conflicted, defensive, emotional, or withdrawn, depending on how deeply the situation has already affected him. Inside this courtroom, the evidence stage in divorce cases, relationship disputes, and custody complexities all blend together. Although this is not a divorce hearing, many of the same emotional injuries appear. There are broken promises, insecurity, distrust, apologies mixed with resentment, and a quiet fear of losing the right to family identity. In many ways, this courtroom feels like the Divorce Course podcast episodes where couples speak about how emotional wounds can become legal conflicts. Some participants have even listened to podcasts like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, trying to understand how lawyers shape legal arguments, how evidence is weighed, and how people attempt to reshape their lives through systems of law. But in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the approach is deeply personal. She reminds everyone that this is not simply about legal categories. It is about families trying to survive emotional storms. The keyword concept of justice in jurisprudence becomes visible here. Justice is not just rules. Justice is the attempt to restore fairness where confusion, harm, or emotional injury have already occurred. In her courtroom, Judge Lauren Lake does not treat justice as distant or abstract. Instead, she confronts the emotional truth behind the legal facts. She tells individuals when their choices have harmed others, when denial has prolonged suffering, and when accountability is needed to move forward. In some situations, the father expresses doubt because of suspected cheating stories. Past messages, arguments, or inconsistent timelines create suspicion. Sometimes the father brings his own emotional trauma, like growing up without a father, or experiencing betrayal in his upbringing. At times, The mother herself admits that emotional decisions were made during times of heartbreak, revenge, or loneliness. These confessions echo themes commonly heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals describe moments of emotional pain and the choices that followed. People do not always act rationally when hurt. Healing and responsibility require honesty and courage. Sometimes another layer of complexity appears when the mother or father has previously been involved in adoption stories, relationships with blended families, or has other children whose paternity was also questioned. This can create emotional exhaustion. Families repeat cycles when hurt is not healed. This courtroom becomes the place where the cycle might finally stop. The father, if unsure, often brings physical resemblance as informal evidence. He may say the child has the same chin, eyes, eyebrows, or facial structure. But resemblance is subjective. Adverse inference in the Evidence Act teaches that assumptions cannot replace scientific proof when the stakes are this high. So the room waits for DNA results, not opinions. This entire process also mirrors conversations from Truth Changes. Everything podcast episodes where uncovering reality can cause emotional shock, but eventually allows honest rebuilding. The courtroom discussions also highlight how Supreme Court child support guidelines require clarity in biological identity before financial responsibility is assigned. Support is not simply economic, it is emotional stability for the child. But a man cannot be required to pay child support if he is not the biological father. So DNA is required not just to affirm fatherhood, but also to avoid injustice. At the same time, Judge Lauren Lake frequently explains that biology is not the complete definition of fatherhood. Many men choose to raise children they did not biologically create. Some of the most heartfelt moments occur when a man declares that even if he is not the biological father, he still wants to remain in the child's life. These admissions come from a place of love, not legal responsibility. The audience watching might recall full episodes of adoption stories, full episodes where adults choose to be parents out of love, rather than biological obligation. But here the first step is truth. Truth gives each person the right to choose their path honestly. Sometimes, during these hearings, a woman expresses regret. Not regret for having her child, but regret for how relationships unfolded, how trust was broken, or how unresolved emotions led to complicated outcomes. Many women show deep remorse, explaining that the truth changes everything once spoken aloud. The child, though often not present physically, is always the center of discussion. The child's emotional stability, identity, and future relationships depend on the adults resolving this conflict. Judge Lauren Lake makes sure everyone remembers that the child is innocent. The man, when he learns he is the father, reacts with a mix of relief, shock, and responsibility. When he learns he is not the father, the reaction is often heartbreak, confusion, and silence. Either outcome reshapes lives. The courtroom sees moments of apology, recognition of wrongdoing, or new plans for rebuilding trust. Some families leave with a new chance at unity. Others separate permanently, but with clarity. But the essential truth remains. Justice begins where denial ends. As the session continues, Judge Lauren Lake maintains careful control over the tone of the courtroom. She balances empathy with authority, ensuring that each person understands both the emotional and legal significance of the situation. The courtroom is not merely a space for determining biological facts. It is a place where emotional truths surface, where people confront decisions they have made over months or even years. The judge speaks in a way that reminds everyone that this is a place to confront reality, not to escape it. The mother is often asked to explain her timeline, her emotional state, and the circumstances that led to the uncertainty of paternity. Her voice may tremble or her tone may shift, but the underlying message is usually consistent. She wants stability for her child. Even when mistakes were made, she sees this courtroom as a place where clarity might allow a fresh start. Her goal, ultimately, is to secure a future where her child knows exactly who they are, and where the adults around them can function in cooperation rather than conflict. The father, meanwhile, is usually asked to speak about his doubts and emotional experiences. He might describe moments where he felt betrayed, or moments when the relationship was unstable. Sometimes the father acknowledges his own mistakes. Other times he places responsibility entirely on the mother. These emotional exchanges reflect the deeper psychological wounds that often accompany paternity uncertainty. The courtroom becomes a place where these wounds are opened, examined, and addressed under structured supervision. If another woman is present, such as a current partner or someone involved in the relationship situation, her presence adds another emotional layer. Her interactions can reflect competition, insecurity, anger, or loyalty. In such cases, Judge Lauren Lake addresses the entire relational dynamic rather than focusing solely on the DNA question. She emphasizes that emotional entanglement between adults must not overshadow the needs of the child. Throughout this detailed questioning, themes from discussions often heard on the Divorce Course podcast appear: heartbreak, miscommunication, jealousy, unfinished emotional cycles, and the nervous attempt to restore dignity after relational chaos. What makes these hearings so powerful is that none of these individuals are merely legal cases. They are people trying to make sense of emotional pain. At this stage of the case, the focus may shift from emotional history to the role of evidence. The judge often reminds the parties that while feelings matter, decisions affecting a child's life need clarity grounded in facts. This is where the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act idea quietly plays a role. Assumptions or suspicions cannot be treated as proof. The courtroom is structured to separate emotional narrative from scientific determination. This is also where the relationship between law and justice becomes intensely visible. Law determines biological responsibility through DNA, custody arrangements, and financial support statutes, such as those reflected in Supreme Court child support procedures. Justice, however, involves understanding the emotional effects of those outcomes. Judge Lauren Lake's method blends these two by insisting that once the biological truth is known, emotional healing must be addressed next. Sometimes, one of the parties expresses that they are anxious about being judged for their past. The mother may fear being labeled irresponsible or unfaithful. The father may fear being seen as uncaring or unreliable. These emotional fears influence the tone of their testimony. The environment becomes not only factual, but deeply personal. In some cases, either parent may reference guidance, counseling, or lessons learned through community support or faith-based recovery settings similar to Celebrate recovery testimonies. These references show that people often come into the courtroom already struggling with identity, guilt, and the desire to grow or change. The courtroom becomes part of that personal transformation process. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges growth where she sees it and challenges denial when necessary. The discussion sometimes touches broader philosophical themes like the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not only the resolution of legal questions, it is also an attempt to restore balance where emotional harm has occurred. This courtroom serves as a setting where people learn that justice is shaped by honesty, accountability, and the willingness to confront truth, even when it hurts. This is also where the impact of cheating stories becomes evident. Infidelity, or even the suspicion of it, erodes trust quickly and deeply. The father may have spent months or years questioning whether the child is his, and this uncertainty often affects his willingness to be emotionally present or financially responsible. The mother may express that loneliness, trauma, or misunderstanding led her to seek emotional reassurance elsewhere. Both perspectives usually involve emotional pain. Judge Lauren Lake recognizes this and emphasizes that healing requires full honesty. Confidence in truth is what allows the courtroom to support outcomes that shape long-term family relationships. If the father is the biological parent, he receives legal confirmation of responsibility and the opportunity to become a stable figure in the child's life. If he is not the father, then emotional separation may occur, but at least it happens with clarity rather than confusion. Some hearings also intersect with broader family experiences, such as those involving adoption, blended households, and family reunification. People sometimes recall adoption stories, full episodes where identity is built through love and nurture, not just biology. These references remind the courtroom that parenthood can exist beyond blood. Still, biology matters because it influences emotional bonds, legal decisions, cultural identity, and psychological grounding. As the hearing progresses and emotional testimonies are shared, the judge guides the discussion toward closure. She makes sure both sides have been heard. She addresses contradictions, clarifies timelines, and ensures that both parents understand what is about to happen. The moment of DNA revelation is near, and the atmosphere changes. Even breathing slows. Even silence becomes heavy. For many, this is the moment where fear transforms into truth. People who expected certainty may suddenly feel doubt. Those who feared the truth may suddenly wish for clarity above all else. The emotional weight of this moment often aligns with the themes discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast. When the truth arrives, it forces alignment between identity and reality. It forces growth. In the courtroom, no one is allowed to interrupt or speak until the results are read. Everyone stands or sits still, waiting. Judge Lauren Lake holds the envelope not as a symbol of authority, but as a doorway through which everyone must step. The judge reads slowly to ensure that the result lands fully and without confusion. Regardless of whether the result confirms or denies paternity, the emotional reaction is real. Tears appear, but for different reasons. Relief, heartbreak, shock, quiet acceptance, or overwhelming grief. The courtroom absorbs it all. Judge Lauren Lake allows space for the emotional moment, but she also guides the next steps. She reminds everyone that the result is not the end. It is the beginning of the life that must follow truth. Once the DNA result is announced, the courtroom enters a new emotional stage. Whatever the outcome, the truth forces each person to face themselves, their decisions, and their responsibility moving forward. The moment after the result carries a silence that is almost heavier than the waiting. This is because the truth, once spoken, leaves no space for denial or argument. It stands alone, absolute and undeniable. If the father is confirmed by the DNA test, there is often a brief emotional release. The mother may express relief because now the child will not have to live in uncertainty. The father may feel overwhelmed, not because the result is unexpected, but because the finality of responsibility becomes real. Any previous doubt dissolves, and what remains is the need to step into the role of a father. In this moment, the judge usually emphasizes accountability, consistency, and the child's emotional needs. She speaks about the importance of being present, not just financially, but emotionally and physically. She reminds the father that children remember love, presence, and care more than anything material. If the father is not confirmed, the atmosphere is different. The mother may show regret or emotional confusion because she must accept that her assumption or hope was not aligned with the biological truth. The father who believed he might be the parent may experience heartbreak. He may have already formed emotional attachment to the child. In some cases, he expresses willingness to continue being present despite not being biologically connected. This moment touches the core of human identity and parental meaning. It mirrors themes seen in adoption stories' full episodes, where love chooses to remain even when biology does not require it. At this stage, Judge Lauren Lake steps into a strong guidance role. She explains that biological truth is the foundation of legal clarity. She emphasizes that while biology matters for legal purposes, such as Supreme Court child support responsibilities, fatherhood is also defined by commitment. She reminds everyone that emotional wounds must be acknowledged openly so that healing can begin. Her guidance connects directly to themes commonly discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront the effects of past pain in order to build a healthier future. The judge also speaks about how the relationship between law and justice must be understood here. Law has now delivered the truth, but justice requires each person to act responsibly with that truth. If the DNA test confirms fatherhood, justice means stepping up with maturity. If the DNA test disproves fatherhood, justice means allowing emotional separation without blame or bitterness, while still respecting the child's emotional needs. At this point, the courtroom discussion shifts to the future. If the man is the father, conversations may include establishing a co-parenting structure, financial support agreements, and guidelines for communication. If the man is not the father, conversations may revolve around emotional closure, boundaries, and respect moving forward. In either outcome, Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that the child must remain the central priority. The adult's feelings are important, but the child's emotional stability must guide decisions. This is where psychological insight meets legal structure. The emotional experiences discussed in the courtroom resemble those often explored in relationship-focused podcasts, such as the Divorce Course podcast and the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where individuals talk about how emotional truths disrupt old patterns and allow new ones to form. The courtroom becomes a living reflection of those discussions. The judge ensures that each person understands that the outcome of this case is not simply a legal verdict. It is the doorway to a different chapter of life. Sometimes one or both parties express regret about how the relationship unfolded. The mother may regret choices made during emotional vulnerability. The father may regret not offering stability earlier or not communicating honestly. These regrets are not treated as shameful. Rather, Judge Lauren Lake encourages individuals to recognize that regret is a natural response when growth begins. The courtroom becomes a symbolic space of accountability where acknowledgement replaces avoidance. In many of these cases, the emotional complexity stems from a history of unresolved pain. Some of the individuals involved may have grown up without stable parental relationships themselves, which influences their expectations of love and family. These patterns echo discussions from recovery, counseling, and relational psychology. The judge's goal, in addition to resolving the legal question, is to prevent this emotional cycle from repeating in the next generation. She reminds everyone that children learn how to form relationships by observing the adults around them. When the mother and father speak about the child's future after the results, the tone shifts from emotional conflict to planning. The judge encourages respectful co-parenting communication, stability in routines, and shared responsibilities. She emphasizes that anger between parents must not interfere with the child's emotional environment. This instruction reflects the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence, where fairness and well-being are prioritized over emotional retaliation. If the father is not the biological parent and chooses to step away, the mother may need to seek legal guidance to identify or locate the actual biological father. In such cases, the emotional adjustment is difficult, but clarity allows the process to move forward. The courtroom makes space for pain, but it also provides direction. Paths to counseling, mediation, and family support services may be discussed. The presence of multiple partners, emotional triangles, or complex relationships often ties into cheating stories that have fueled mistrust between the individuals involved. These stories are acknowledged not to assign blame, but to understand how emotional instability formed. Judge Lauren Lake explains that healing requires honest ownership of one's actions. She encourages all parties to recognize patterns so that they do not repeat them in future relationships. The judge also explains that truth is not the enemy. Avoiding truth creates prolonged suffering. Facing truth, while painful, allows everyone to rebuild their lives with integrity. This is the same principle emphasized in psychological and relational recovery communities. Truth is the foundation of transformation. As the session nears its end, the judge gives final statements that usually include emotional guidance, legal direction, and practical next steps. She encourages maturity, communication, and responsibility. She reminds the parents that the child deserves stability and emotional safety. The adults are asked to rise above their pain so that the child does not inherit emotional burdens that are not theirs to carry. When the parents leave the courtroom, the atmosphere shifts once more. There may not be closure immediately, but there is clarity. Clarity gives power. Clarity gives direction. Clarity allows the future to be built on truth rather than uncertainty. The courtroom doors close, but the emotional journey continues outside. Some leave with relief, some leave with tears. Some leave determined to become better parents or stronger individuals. And in every case, the truth spoken in that courtroom has indeed changed everything.